All right, let's dive in. This time we're looking at giants, UFOs, and the occult. Seems like a wild mix, right?
Yeah, pretty versatile.
But we've got a whole pile of sources here. YouTube, articles, transcripts, and they all seem to hint at these, well, connections. Pretty wild connections. I mean, giants, UFOs.
It's definitely some out there stuff, but that's what makes it so interesting to look into.
Exactly. I mean, I'm a skeptic, but, got to keep an open mind, see if anything actually, holds up.
Right. It's all about exploring the ideas, seeing what makes sense, what doesn't.
So where do we even start? I mean, these topics seem so huge. Where's the entry point?
Well, one place that keeps popping up is this whole idea of the Nephilim. Remember them? From, Genesis.
Yeah, vaguely. Been a while since Sunday school.
Well, basically, they're described as these offspring of sons of God and human women.
Okay, and this is the controversy, right? Sons of God. Who are we talking about here?
Right, that's the big debate. Some people interpret it as, fallen angels, which,
Yeah.
Gets into some pretty wild territory, like a whole secret war going on.
Whoa, fallen angels. Okay.
Yeah.
But, I mean, isn't that a pretty radical interpretation? Wouldn't that kind of turn everything we know on its head? History, biology, everything.
Yeah, it's definitely one way to look at it. But there are other interpretations, too. Some people think it could just refer to powerful human rulers or like a separate lineage of humans takes the supernatural element out of it completely.
Oh, interesting. So it's like how you interpret it depends on what you already believe.
Yeah, exactly. And ancient texts are always open to interpretation. It's like a mirror reflecting our own beliefs and, biases.
It makes you wonder how these interpretations change over time as we learn more.
Sure. Our understanding of the world is always evolving, so it makes sense that our interpretations of ancient texts would evolve too.
Right, right. But okay, so whether it's fallen angels or powerful humans, the idea of giants has definitely stuck around. And some of the stuff we're looking at claims that there are giant skeletons out there, like actual skeletons that have been found. But, the evidence is being suppressed. What do you make of that?
The giant skeletons. That's a tricky one. Yeah, you'll find pictures and stories online, but most archaeologists just kind of dismiss it as hoaxes or misinterpretations.
Okay, so no chance of finding Bigfoot's giant cousin hiding in a museum basement then?
Probably not. Extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence, right?
True, true. But why do you think people are so drawn to this idea of giant skeletons, even without the solid proof?
I think it taps into this deep human desire for, I don't know, proof of the extraordinary. We want to believe there's more to history than what's in the textbooks. What if giants actually roamed the earth? What if there were these super advanced civilizations that we've just forgotten about?
Yeah, I get that. It's like adding a bit of magic to the world, right?
Exactly.
So from giants in the past, our sources jump to something that feels much more present. UFO abductions.
Yeah. And in that whole world, Bud Hopkins is a key figure. He was actually an artist originally, but then he got really into UFOs, started using hypnosis to try and uncover repressed memories in people who claim to have been abducted.
Oh, wow, hypnosis. That's fascinating. So was he the first to use that technique in this field?
Pretty much, yeah. He was a pioneer in that area of research.
And there was that one case, right, Linda Cortile. She claimed to have been abducted, in broad daylight, right in front of people, even some potential UN personnel. That's wild.
Yeah, that's one of the most well-known cases. Definitely got a lot of attention. And it's not just the multiple witnesses. It's also the claims of, government cover-ups, occult connections, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, but even with witnesses, wouldn't there be some kind of official record, police reports, something? It's not like you could just, erase a public event like that, right?
Right. That's the thing with a lot of these abduction stories. Hard evidence is pretty scarce.
So are we saying it's all in people's heads then? Or is there a chance something really unexplained is going on?
Well, it's important to acknowledge there are other possible explanations. Sleep paralysis can make people feel like they're being held down and they can have hallucinations. And then there's false memory syndrome where people remember things that didn't actually happen.
Yeah, those are definitely things to consider. But our sources also go into this whole idea of the government being involved, not just covering things up, but actually participating in abductions. Is that a common theory?
Yeah, it's a popular theme in UFO lore. Nick Redfern, in his book Top Secret Alien Abduction Files, he claims that government agencies aren't just watching abductees, they might be staging abductions themselves.
Whoa, staging them, that's a whole other level. But why? I mean, what would be the point of faking an alien abduction?
Well, Redfern throws out some ideas like maybe they're studying how people react to stress and trauma, or maybe they're using it as cover to test some new technology. Who knows? It's definitely controversial, though.
It's like the ultimate conspiracy theory, right?
Yeah.
The government is using aliens for their own secret agenda.
Yeah, pretty much. And it plays right into that whole trust no one mentality that's so common in this field.
Definitely. Okay, but shifting gears a bit, our sources also bring up a location that's got this whole mysterious vibe, Mount Hermon.
Ah, Mount Hermon. Yeah, it's a pretty significant place in a lot of different traditions. Religious, mystical, you name it. You see it mentioned in the Bible, the Book of Enoch, all sorts of ancient texts.
Okay, but what's so special about it? Is it just the location, or is there something more going on?
Well, according to some people, Mount Hermon is where the Watchers, these fallen angels, came down to Earth and started messing around with humans.
Wait, fallen angels again. We're back to that.
Seems to be a recurring theme, right?
Okay, so Mount Hermon is like their hangout spot, where they blurred the lines between, heaven and earth.
Something like that, yeah. And some people see it as a symbol of rebellion against, like, divine order, a place where things went wrong.
Interesting. But our sources also mention other mountains, like Carmel, Olympus, even the Tower of Babel. Is there a connection between all these places, or is that just a coincidence?
That's where it gets really interesting. Some researchers see these places as, like, false mountains of assembly. Attempts by humans to reach beyond their limits, to access forbidden knowledge or power. Like the Tower of Babel, trying to reach heaven.
So it's not just about the physical mountains, it's about what they represent.
Right, it's symbolic, ambition, overreaching, the consequences of trying to play God. And this theme actually connects to a lot of modern anxieties too, especially about technology and transhumanism.
Oh, right, like those fears about AI becoming too powerful.
Exactly. It's like a modern version of the same story, the same anxieties about what happens when we push too far, try to become more than human.
Makes you think. And speaking of pushing boundaries, our sources also talk about this idea of a return of the Nephilim, but this time it's through, like, genetic engineering and transhumanist technology. Is this a serious concern, or are we getting into, like, sci-fi territory here?
It's definitely a concept that pops up a lot, especially in the works of Jeffrey Martis and Rob Skiba. They suggest that these fallen angels or maybe some other malevolent forces are using advanced technology to create a new generation of, well, hybrid beings.
So instead of giants roaming around, we've got genetically modified superhumans, like a real-life X-Men situation.
It's a pretty wild idea.
But why focus on DNA? What's the significance of genetic manipulation in all of this?
Well, think about it. DNA is the blueprint of life, right? It's the code that determines who we are. And if that code can be manipulated, altered, maybe even corrupted, it raises all sorts of questions about what it means to be human.
Yeah, I can see how that would tap into some deep fears, like, are we losing control of our own evolution?
Well, exactly.
Okay, but hold on. We've talked about giants, fallen angels, transhumanism. Where do UFOs actually fit into all of this? Are we talking aliens, angels, or something else entirely?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Are UFOs extraterrestrial spacecraft? Or are they something more like interdimensional vehicles, spiritual manifestations, or even, top-secret government technology disguised as something otherworldly?
It's like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces keep changing shape.
Exactly. And it's why this topic is so fascinating and so frustrating at the same time.
And to add another layer to this whole thing, one of our sources talks about a personal experience that kind of blurs the lines between UFOs and the occult. It's a coast-to-coast AM interview with Peter Robbins, who claims he was abducted as a child.
Oh yeah, Robbins' story. It's pretty compelling because he goes into detail about the physical effects, the emotional trauma, years of repressed memories that he only recovered through hypnosis. And what's interesting is that he actually worked with Bud Hopkins, the abduction researcher we talked about earlier, so he's got a unique perspective on all of this.
So it's not just one isolated incident for him. He's been involved in multiple abduction cases. But what makes his story stand out from the countless other abduction stories out there?
Well, he knew Linda Cortell personally. Remember her? Though a woman abducted in broad daylight, Robbins actually witnessed the aftermath of her alleged abduction. So he's got firsthand experience with a case that's already full of strange details.
Wow, that's a pretty direct connection. It's like these two separate abduction events are somehow linked. And it makes you wonder, are there patterns, similarities, things that keep showing up in these different stories? Because another theme that keeps popping up in our research is this idea that some of these abductions might not be extraterrestrial at all, but interdimensional.
Yeah, the interdimensional hypothesis has definitely gained traction in recent years. It suggests that UFOs and whoever's piloting them might not be traveling through space, but through other dimensions, like realms that exist alongside our own but are usually hidden from us.
It's like that scene in The Matrix where Neo realizes there's more to reality than meets the eye. Pretty mind-blowing. But what's the appeal of this interdimensional idea? Why would people be more inclined to believe in beings from other dimensions than, say, aliens from another planet?
I think it's because it connects the UFO phenomenon to all these ancient myths and spiritual traditions, stories about other realms, spirit worlds, beings that can cross over from one dimension to another. It adds this layer of complexity and suggests that our reality might just be a small part of a much larger interconnected multiverse.
So instead of little green men from Mars, we've got interdimensional beings popping in and out of our reality. It's a pretty wild thought. And it makes you wonder, are they using some kind of technology or ability that we can't even fathom, to manipulate our perception, make us see what they want us to see?
It's a possibility we can't rule out, especially when you consider the high strangeness of a lot of these UFO encounters. Missing time, distorted memories, physical evidence that seems to defy the laws of physics. If these beings are truly interdimensional, maybe they operate under a completely different set of rules.
It's like we're dealing with something that's beyond our current understanding of science and reality. And that brings up another big question that we can't ignore. The connection that a lot of people make between UFOs and, well, the occult, even demonic forces. Some of our sources seem to suggest that these abductions might have a darker, more sinister purpose. Is that just fear-mongering, or is there something more to it?
It's a connection that comes up a lot, but I think it's important to be nuanced here. Some people see parallels between abduction experiences and accounts of like demonic possession or encounters with other supernatural entities, the feelings of terror, violation, and even the religious or spiritual themes that sometimes come up.
Right, it's not just about the physical experience, it's the emotional and psychological impact too. And that connection to the occult is especially strong when you look at Mount Hermon, right? It's a place that's been associated with fallen angels, giants, a gateway to other realms. Is it possible that these ancient myths are reflecting a reality that we're only just beginning to understand?
Mount Hermon seems to be a kind of nexus point in a lot of these narratives. It links ancient myths to modern accounts of UFO sightings and abductions. It's like this mountain represents a thin veil between our world and other dimensions, a place where the supernatural can bleed into our reality.
It's a chilling thought. And our sources don't just stop at Mount Hermon. They talk about other mountains and locations that seem to hold similar significance. Mount Carmel, Mount Olympus, even the Tower of Babel. Are we just seeing patterns where none exist, or is there something more to it?
It's a fascinating question. Some researchers believe that these false mountains of assembly, as they're sometimes called, were sites of ritualistic practices, attempts to connect with the divine or tap into forbidden knowledge and power. It ties into that theme of human ambition and the potential consequences of overreaching. Like, we're trying to reach something beyond our grasp, and it might not end well.
It's almost as if these mountains are magnets for the supernatural, attracting both the best and worst aspects of human nature. The desire for enlightenment, the temptation for power, the yearning for the divine, the allure of the forbidden.
And it makes you wonder, if these mountains were indeed sites of supernatural activity in the past, are they still active today? Could they still be acting as portals or energy centers that connect our world to other dimensions?
That's a thought-provoking question, and one that leads us to the next layer of this deep dive. Our sources reveal a potential connection between UFO abductions, government surveillance, and something called vehicle interference. What exactly is vehicle interference, and how does it fit into this puzzle?
It's basically when UFOs seem to mess with vehicles, like causing them to stall, malfunction, even total electrical failure. And it often happens close to where people report abductions.
So it's not just lights in the sky anymore. These things are like messing with our cars. It sounds like something out of a, I don't know, a sci-fi movie or something.
Yeah.
But why would they do that? Just to scare people? Or is there like a strategic reason behind it?
Well, one of the sources we looked at, it's a Coast to Coast AM interview with Nick Redfern. He suggests that it might be intentional, like a way to disable vehicles and isolate their targets, make abductions easier.
Ooh, that's kind of creepy. Imagine you're driving down a dark road, your car just dies, and then you see this like strange light in the sky. Not a good situation. But Redfern doesn't stop there, does he? He also ties this vehicle interference thing to government surveillance.
Yeah, he goes there. He proposes that intelligence agencies might know about this phenomenon and could even be using it for their own purposes. Like maybe they're staging these abduction events, to study how people react or to discredit anyone who reports these experiences.
Okay, that's getting a little paranoid, don't you think? The government using UFOs to scare people and then study their reactions.
I know it sounds far-fetched,
Yeah.
but it plays into that whole lack of trust, the suspicion that's so prevalent in this field.
It definitely adds another layer of weirdness to the whole thing. But if the government is really involved, wouldn't there be some kind of proof? Whistleblowers, leaked documents, something.
You'd think so, right? But that's the challenge with a lot of these theories. Hard evidence is hard to come by. And the lack of proof just fuels more speculation and mistrust.
It's a vicious cycle. Okay, so Redfern connects this vehicle interference and staged abductions thing to Roswell, the Roswell incident. For those who might not know, what happened at Roswell, and why is it still such a big deal after all these years?
Oh, Roswell. It's like the granddaddy of UFO conspiracies. Back in 1947, there was this alleged crash of a unidentified flying object near Roswell, New Mexico. The military first said it was a flying disc, but then they changed their story and said it was just a weather balloon.
A weather balloon?
Yeah.
Come on, that's kind of a weak explanation, isn't it? Especially with all the eyewitness accounts and those rumors about, like, alien bodies being recovered.
Yeah, it doesn't really hold up, does it? And Redfern's theory is that Roswell might have been staged. Like, maybe it was some kind of advanced technology disguised as an alien spacecraft. He suggests the government use this whole alien crash story as a cover to test and deploy new technologies without raising suspicion.
Okay, that's actually kind of clever. Use the whole alien thing as a distraction. But what kind of technologies are we talking about? And why go through all that trouble to keep them secret?
Well, Redfern links Roswell to the development of stealth technology and other advanced aircraft. Like maybe they were testing these things out and used the alien crash as a way to explain away any strange sightings or radar anomalies.
It's like something out of a spy movie, you know? A secret military base, a crashed spaceship, a government cover-up. Very cloak and dagger. But if they were willing to stage an alien crash to hide their tech, what else might they be hiding from us?
That's the question that drives a lot of these conspiracy theories, right? What is the truth? What are they keeping from us? And it all boils down to trust, or the lack of it. Can we trust the government to be honest about these things? Or are they always going to be hiding something to protect their own interests?
It's like we're stuck in this web of mystery, and every thread we pull leads to another question, another layer of intrigue. And as we go deeper into these sources, we keep bumping into this theme of a hidden war, like a battle between forces that are beyond our understanding, a war that might be happening right under our noses.
It's a pretty unsettling thought, isn't it? This idea that humanity is caught in the crossfire of some cosmic struggle between good and evil. It's a theme that you see in ancient myths, religious texts, even modern conspiracy theories.
And one of the sources we looked at, a YouTube video about the Book of Enoch, really digs into this idea. What does the Book of Enoch tell us about this hidden war? And how does it connect to all this other stuff we've been talking about?
The Book of Enoch, well, it's an ancient text that didn't make it into the Bible, but it's still important to a lot of mystical and esoteric traditions. And this video, it breaks down the book's account of these fallen angels, their rebellion against God, and how they interacted with humanity, including the whole thing about creating the Nephilim.
So we're back to the Nephilim again. It's like they're the common thread in all of this. But how does this ancient story connect to the modern UFO and abduction phenomenon? Is it just a coincidence, or is there something more going on?
The video suggests that maybe the beings behind these modern events are the same fallen angels from the Book of Enoch, or maybe their descendants, and they're continuing their mission to manipulate and control humanity.
It's like a cosmic soap opera with ancient grudges and power struggles playing out across millennia. Pretty dramatic stuff. But if there really is a hidden war, a battle between good and evil, where do we as humans fit into all of this? Are we just pawns in their game, or do we have a role to play in this cosmic drama?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's one that each of us has to answer for ourselves. The sources we've looked at don't give us any easy answers, but they do give us a way to think about our fascination with the unknown, the supernatural, and the possibility that there are forces out there that we just don't understand.
It's definitely a lot to take in. Ancient texts, government conspiracies, interdimensional beings, a hidden war. It can make your head spin. But let's shift gears a bit and look at another piece of this puzzle. The concept of false mountains of assembly. What are these false mountains, and why are they important when we're talking about giants, abductions, and the occult?
Well, this idea of false mountains of assembly comes from researchers like Derek Gilbert and L.A. Marzulli. They see a pattern in ancient myths and religious texts that links certain mountains to the activities of fallen angels, giants, and all sorts of occult stuff. These mountains are like places where supernatural forces gather and where humanity tries to push beyond its limits, often with bad results.
So it's not just that they're mountains, it's what they represent. They have
Yeah.
symbolic meaning, like a spiritual significance.
Exactly. And they're called false because they represent attempts to take over divine authority, like creating a fake version of God's true mountain. They symbolize human ambition and the desire to reach heaven, to get power and knowledge that maybe we're not supposed to have.
And we see specific mountains mentioned, right? Mount Hermon, Mount Carmel, Olympus, even the Tower of Babel. It's interesting that these places are all over the world from different cultures and time periods, but they all seem to share this idea of humans trying to go beyond their limits.
Yeah, it's like this recurring theme in human history. We're always trying to reach for something more, something beyond our understanding. And these mountains represent that ambition, the good and the bad that comes with it.
It's like they're these magnets for the supernatural, drawing in people who want enlightenment, people who crave power, people who are searching for something, whether it's the divine or the forbidden. But if these mountains were really hubs of supernatural activity in the past, are they still active now? Could they still be working as portals or like energy centers that connect us to other dimensions?
That's a great question. It really makes you think. Could these ancient places still have the power to connect us to other realms, to open up doorways to the unknown? And if so, what would happen if someone tapped into that energy today? Would they unleash something powerful, something dangerous?
Now that's a scary thought. And as we keep going down this rabbit hole of ancient myths and modern mysteries, we have to ask ourselves, are we ready for what might happen if these theories turn out to be true?
It's the ultimate question, and it's something we all have to grapple with as we try to make sense of this world with all its strangeness and uncertainty. The sources we've looked at don't give us all the answers, but they do encourage us to think bigger, to question what we think we know, and to be open to the possibility that there's more to reality than meets the eye.
And that brings us to the final and maybe the most unsettling part of this deep dive. This idea that all these seemingly random threads, giants, UFOs, the occult, these false mountains, they might all be coming together in a way that could change how we understand reality itself.
It's a pretty big concept to wrap your head around. A lot of the sources we've looked at suggest that we're not just dealing with separate, isolated events, but a convergence of all these things. Ancient myths colliding with modern mysteries. And it could be pointing to a major shift in human consciousness, a change in how we see ourselves and our place in the universe.
Whoa. But what would that shift even look like? Are we talking about a spiritual awakening, a technological singularity, a merging of dimensions? What part do we play in all of this? It's like we're looking into this like abyss of the unknown, where science and spirituality and technology and the supernatural is all getting mixed up. But if all these forces are coming together, what does that mean for us? Are we even ready for that kind of shift in how we see the world?
It's the big question, right? And the sources we've been looking at, they offer all sorts of different perspectives. Some are pretty utopian, like a spiritual awakening, but others are more dystopian, like warnings about technology taking over, or even like apocalyptic scenarios with dimensional clashes and spiritual warfare.
It's a lot to process, that's for sure. But some of the stuff we've seen, especially the stuff about the occult and the Nephilim coming back, it paints a pretty dark picture of the future. Are those ideas something to be genuinely worried about, or is it just like people trying to scare us?
I think it's important to be careful with that kind of stuff. Some sources definitely lean into the sensationalism, the whole doomsday prophecy thing. But there are legitimate concerns, too, about how technology could be misused, how information can be manipulated, and how our values might get lost in all this rapid technological advancement.
So it's not necessarily about literal demons and angels fighting, but more like a symbolic struggle between like the forces of progress and the people who want to control and exploit it for their own benefit.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. It's about the choices we make, both as individuals and as a society. Do we use technology to make things better, to create a more just and sustainable world? Or do we let it be used to control us, to take away our freedom and privacy?
It's a question we have to keep asking, especially now with AI, genetic engineering, all these powerful technologies emerging. But okay, so we've talked about the potential dangers, the dystopian stuff, but some of our sources are more optimistic, right?
Mm-hmm.
They suggest that this whole convergence could lead to something positive, like a spiritual awakening, a greater understanding of how everything's connected, our place in the cosmos, all that.
Right. Some people see it as a chance for humanity to evolve, to go beyond our limits and embrace a more holistic view of the world. They say that by exploring these mysteries, by questioning our assumptions and opening our minds, we can access a deeper level of wisdom and potential.
Okay, that's a much more hopeful perspective. But how do we reconcile those two extremes, the warnings and the promises? Is it possible that they're both true, that we're headed towards a future that has both huge dangers and amazing opportunities?
I think that's exactly the kind of world we're living in now. Things are getting more complex, more uncertain, the old ways of thinking are breaking down, and all these new possibilities are emerging. It's both exciting and scary at the same time. And the choices we make, individually and as a society, are going to determine what happens next.
So what can we do? If we're in the middle of all this change, this convergence of forces that's reshaping everything, how do we navigate it? What can we learn from all this research to help us understand it and maybe steer things in a positive direction?
One of the biggest takeaways, I think, is the importance of critical thinking. Questioning everything, being aware of biases, looking for different perspectives. We have to be careful about what information we consume, be aware of manipulation, and be willing to have honest conversations with people who see things differently.
It's like, don't just give in to fear and don't blindly accept one narrative as the absolute truth. Be skeptical, ask questions, and look for real evidence.
Exactly. And along with that, I think it's important to keep that sense of wonder, that curiosity, be willing to explore the unknown, to consider that there might be more to reality than what we can see and touch.
So don't just shut down when things get weird, but be open to learning and searching for truth no matter where it leads.
Yeah, I think that's key. And maybe by exploring these mysteries, we'll discover something amazing about ourselves, about our place in the universe, and all the incredible possibilities that are out there.
Well, that about wraps up this deep dive. We've covered a lot, from ancient myths to UFO sightings, government conspiracies, and the occult side of mountains. We've looked at both the light and the dark, the potential for both destruction and transformation. And even though we might not have all the answers, I think we've gotten a better sense of just how complex these topics are and how important it is to approach them with open minds and critical thinking. What do you think?
I agree. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is that we have power in all of this. We're not just watching from the sidelines. We have choices to make. We can shape our own destinies, and we can create a future that reflects our values and aspirations.
It's a good reminder that even when things seem chaotic and uncertain, we still have the power to choose hope over fear, curiosity over dogma, and a commitment to truth over blind belief. And who knows? Maybe by exploring these mysteries, we'll discover something truly profound about ourselves and the universe we live in. So to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep an open mind, and never stop searching for truth, wherever it may lead.